96.965 billion naira in the month of August. Federal Executive Council grants 1.04 billion naira variation for health and water. 5 top banks fined 1.4 billion naira for forex infractions and other contracts. Senate approves $57 oil benchmark for 2022 budget as federal government reviews growth projections for the year 2021. Details of these and more on Business Express on the network service of the NTA, and we're reaching you live from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I'm Leah Katun, Baba Tunde. And so we move into the very business of the day, and we start by informing you that the Federation Accounts Allocation Committee, FARC, says it shared a total of 696.965 billion naira as August 2021 revenue to the federal, states and local governments, as well as other relevant agencies in the country. The shared revenue was contained in a communique issued by FARC after its monthly meeting for September 2021 held through virtual conferencing. Director Information, Press and Public Relations Office of the Accountant General of the Federation, Henshaw Ogubike, who revealed this in a statement, added that the gross statutory revenue for August was 477.5 billion naira. The gross revenue from value-added tax was 166.23 billion naira, and revenue from exchange gain amounted to 2.83 billion naira. The OAGF also said that the excess bank charges recovered was 403 million naira, while revenue from non-oil was 50 billion naira, bringing the total gross revenue to 696.97 billion naira. The statement said in August 2021, the sum of 72.29 billion naira was the total deductions for cost of collection, statutory transfers and refunds, with the excess accrued account now standing at $60.857 million. We move now to the currency market to see how the naira is exchanging for other currencies. The Federal Executive Council has approved the sum of 121 million naira as refurnished and to refurnish, the dilapidated furniture in Federal Polytechnic Bauchi to facilitate teaching and learning in the school.
Been to use the opportunity to retool and refurnish some of the dilapidated equipment and furniture at some of the departments at the Federal Polytechnic and Bauchi for this at the sum of 121 million naira.
And so we move on to some other stories. Despite about 2.3 trillion naira interventions by the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, and the federal government, 73% of businesses in Nigeria reported that they were faced with cash crunches in 2020 following COVID-19 lockdowns. However, 57% of businesses were able to maintain their staff strength during the pandemic. Many businesses, particularly informal ones, reported poor access to credit and capital to sustain their enterprises, including difficulty paying fixed costs like rent. Let's now. Yes.
Loss in revenue reported remained at 44% in comparison to what we had in 2019. Similarly, close to 60% of enterprises surveyed experienced an increase in operational costs.
The impact and the recovery of these losses is expected to be uneven for businesses across operating models and sectors. The report is also a testament of the strength and innovation and the resilience of those making up the backbone of the Nigerian economy.
Of course, some updates there from the UNDP and the Nigeria National Bureau for Statistics. Now, to further shed light on how issues around unemployment can be addressed is an economist, Tifa Abraham. He joins me via telephone. You're welcome, Dr. Abraham.
Thank you very much, Leah. My pleasure.
Great. So based on the UNDP report, 20% of Nigerians lost jobs in the year 2020. What will be your take on that percentage, and was it expected?
Yes, it was expected because of the impact of COVID-19 on the global economy and the Nigerian economy by extension. Now, but before that COVID impact that took away 20% of full-time workers' job in Nigeria, we already had a situation where unemployment was becoming worrisome. Remember that unemployment rate rose to 33% in the fourth quarter of 2020 compared to 27.1% in the second quarter of the year 2020. The unemployment rate among young persons between 15 to 34 years was also something else, as it increased to 42.5% in the fourth quarter of 2020 compared to 34.9% in the second quarter of 2020. So that paints a worrisome picture regarding unemployment and job loss. So what we have from this UNDP NBS report just shows again that unemployment remains something to be worried about. But that does not mean that the government is not doing anything. It was the impact of COVID-19. And perhaps the report was to show us how serious this unemployment issue has become so that we can rejig policies towards tackling unemployment again.
Okay, perfect. And now we also saw during that period disruptions in supply chains and, of course, to ongoing supply and demand shocks, as well as a drop in consumer confidence. So if you would speak from your point of view this time around, how do you think we can address these, particularly job cuts, job losses, and underemployment?
There is a serious connection between production and consumption. Production is the aspect that employs people to work in factories, in offices, in businesses, as distributors, as primary staff, as secondary staff, depending on where they are in the production and supply chain. Now, so long as consumption is not going on, companies, factories, manufacturing firms cannot expand. What happened in COVID-19 in 2020 was that for small businesses, 81% of them lost revenue, according to the UNDP NBS report, and 73% of them faced liquidity challenge. That was because the kind of supply chain they had in clothing and other kind of products that are not directly food, all of them didn't have consumption coming their way. So to rejig this sector and to get them back to the performance track, there's need for government policy to support consumption. This consumption should be in form of subsidies, helping businesses to cover the loss they incurred in COVID-19 year, expanding access to credit and grants so that these companies and businesses can be able to cover the negative effect that COVID-19 had on their operational balance sheets.
Now, the federal government, talking about, of course, creating these jobs, recently launched a 4-year youth empowerment and employment rather plan to create more jobs. How do you see this addressing the challenge here?
If you recall my introduction, I made it clear that unemployment is even more severe on young people, especially women and girls. Now, that federal government 4-year plan is youth specific, and it's a perfect idea because addressing youth employment is addressing future unemployment and today's sources of vulnerability and violent extremism in Nigeria. There's a study I recall by Action Aid Nigeria Youth Digital Engagement Program that also emphasized how the effect of unemployment is taking its toll on young people especially. So that plan by the federal government is just is a perfect one given the timing that it is coming into operation. Now, don't forget, aside what the federal government is doing through that plan, there's also the COVID-19 Action, Recovery and Economic Stimulus Program, the World Bank CARES Program, that supported countries, including Nigeria, with about $750 million, working with states to ensure that they implement this World Bank CARES Program that started December 14, 2020, and to last to 2023 June will also be important. The Ministry of Finance putting in place policies to ensure smooth monitoring, tracking, and evaluation of what states are doing with the World Bank CARES Fund they receive to address poverty, unemployment, and inequality will also be very important. But from the federal government 4-year plan, it's important to ensure that these programs that seek to create jobs, address poverty, are youth-focused, especially for women and girls.
Okay, while we're looking at the focus of these programs, and now funds are being injected, of course, from development partners and as well as the government. But then, what are the kind of jobs that that should be invested on? Because clearly, jobs have changed, and they're changing every day. The whole economy is moving to the digital space. What are the jobs, the future jobs that we should be investing on now?
The future jobs we should be investing on for Nigeria should be one that combines both the digital job creation and also another aspect that supports traditional jobs. The Nigerian economy cannot 100% be hosted on digital space. What we should be talking about in Nigeria now is a combination of every business having maybe 60% digital, 40% traditional, or 40% digital, 60% traditional, depending on their own production mix. But taking all jobs to the internet will also, in a way, mean loss of jobs to local people in rural areas who are very vital in the supply chain. What the kind of jobs that can also help in Nigeria going forward is to help local producers have a platform on the connected economy space that helps them market their goods and reach out to Nigerian businesses. So job creation now should be focused on helping maybe agricultural farmers, rural producers, people like that, get their products on the digital space. But don't forget, there's a huge debt of ICT infrastructure that we have to address in the rural area to get them to benefit from the connected economy. Otherwise, middlemen with platforms on their devices will be the one ripping up the benefit, while other people that are in the traditional economy will be doing all of the hard work. So in summary, it's important we invest in the digital economy, getting businesses to be connected, enhancing skills of young women, girls, boys, young people on the digital space and how to take advantage of the digital economy. But it's important to ensure that there's a smooth mix between the digital space and the traditional space. Otherwise, you can have 40 people based in the US who have platforms to connect all our agricultural products in Nigeria, making the money of the distribution you and I are going through here, while the people that are actually in the production business are not getting anything. So empowering young people to know how to create softwares that can create platform, and if possible, giving them patents, and the government also investing in that space and getting people to take their goods and services to that platform that is originally Nigerian will also be very, very, very important.
Okay, so before I let you go, what will be the place of data and, of course, monitoring in all of this?
The data will help us plan better, but sadly, the quantum of data we need to understand the effect of the connected economy on rural areas, on women and girls who are farmers, fishermen, who are in extremely remote areas. We cannot easily access that kind of data because of the challenge of getting full-time data. Even the UNDP NBS report that told us that a 20% loss in job was based on a survey conducted on 3,000 people. So you can see getting data to now extract policy policy actions is something that we are really working. It's a challenge that Nigeria needs to address going forward. But we thank God that the NPS is doing its best to that area. So we certainly need data, but not data about people in the cities, but rather how the whole supply chain of our production and employment process is being affected from the rural area to the city. Then lastly, to also ensure effective, sustainable job creation is important to get every ministry, department, and agency to focus on employing more civil servants. Remember, it was because of the policy of stay at home, but you were being paid, that even reduced the effect of poverty and unemployment in Nigeria. If the government didn't do stay at home and you were paid, there would have been massive level of unemployment and poverty. So the federal government should continue to do its best to expand the public sector, but also ensure that its operations of the staff remains effective while wiping away all these ghost workers and halting this tradition of contracting government office jobs to people outside the system.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Tefa Abraham, for always spending your time with us.
The pleasure is mine.
Thank you. So we move on. The Senate has approved the 2022 to 2024 Medium-Term Expenditure Framework and Fiscal Strategy Paper, FSP, with the approval of federal government aggregate expenditure of 13.98 trillion naira for 2022 fiscal year and a projected GDP growth rate of 4.2%.
That the projected new borrowing of 4.89 trillion, including the foreign and the domestic borrowing, be approved, subject to the provision of the details of the borrowing plan to the National Assembly. 8, that $3.5 billion International Monetary Fund loan at a rate of 0.1 to 0.02 be approved to shore up the internal borrowing and to reduce the external borrowing because of the exchange rate.
Our concern must be, what are we borrowing for? If our borrowing is to develop infrastructural facilities, our educational facilities, I think it is a good thing to borrow, to develop education and increase capacity of the younger generation.
We should not be afraid of the fiscal deficit. This deficit is necessary. In fact, in the world today, there is no nation, with maybe a possible exception of China, that is free from this huge deficit.
Now, COVID-19 pandemic has had an enormous impact on the beauty personal care industry. Perfumes were one of the sectors acclaimed as being hardest hit during the lockdown. But how has the fragrance sector adapted? Nneka Oku spoke with Saudatu Aminu Muazu to find out more.
Surviving COVID-19 series is brought to you in partnership with the Central Bank of Nigeria.
25-year-old Saudatu Muazu makes a living selling perfumes.
I wanted to have something of my own, and the first time I came across the scents, I loved them, and I knew that this is something I can sell. So I started selling them, and I realized that this is what I want.
1 year into the business, her dream of becoming a major distributor in the fragrance industry was disrupted by the outbreak of the global pandemic.
People were placing orders and, it was still new. I was trying to keep up, be consistent, but then I couldn't because I had to stop for a while. I used that period to market because I just started. I told people that bought to keep marketing. We're going to get more. But even at that time, I was able to get some, just a little, at least the samples.
Saudatu, like most MSMEs, is anticipating a full recovery, but not without some assistance.
With my funds, I'm only able to order as much as I can with what I have. But if I get more, I can order more, based on demand, because there's demand, but sometimes I can't supply a lot. I can only do as much. So, I would expand.
One lesson from the pandemic, she said, is always plan ahead.
Surviving COVID-19 series is brought to you in partnership with the Central Bank of Nigeria.
The Industrial Training Fund, ITF, is partnering Skills for Prosperity Nigeria to promote skills acquisition and entrepreneurship development in the country. To this end, a memorandum of understanding was signed aimed at equipping the youth with the right skills to meet the need of the private and public sectors.
I think we have some key areas that we intend to work with them on this. The first one is to see how we can provide skills for our teeming youths that are unemployed or underemployed within the economy by way of giving them the requisite competencies that they need so that they can be on their own. And this kind of program usually comes with an entrepreneurship development component.
Partnership with the ITF is about providing technical assistance and capacity building to ensure that the apprenticeship system in Nigeria is fit for purpose for what the private sector needs. So I think we can agree there's a lot of opportunity, there's a lot of unemployed youths in Nigeria, and it's about equipping them with the skills that the private sector wants and needs to give them jobs that last, sustainable job opportunities.
Let's now take a trip to the commodities market. Nigeria is on the verge of reclaiming another significant amount of looted funds stashed in the United Kingdom by some high-profile citizens of the country. Attorney General and Minister of Justice Abubakar Malami, who announced this while speaking on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly in New York, also gives updates on the arrest and investigation of those allegedly financing terrorist activities in Nigeria.
As far as the General Assembly is concerned, we are trying to gather international momentum towards a common understanding of how we can work together in terms of making things easier for countries to recover assets with ease.
Now, stocks in Nigeria off to a slow start this morning after closing flat midweek, with investors losing 16.97 billion naira. Asia Pacific stocks mostly rose in Thursday trade.
The U.S. Federal Reserve on Wednesday held benchmark interest rate near zero, but indicated that rate hikes could be coming sooner than expected, and it significantly cut its economic outlook for this year. U.S. stock index futures were higher in early morning trading on Thursday. Futures contrast tied to the Dow Jones Industrial Average gained. S&P 500 futures and Nasdaq 100 futures both traded in positive territory. European stocks opened higher Thursday as global markets reacted to the latest sentiment from the U.S. Federal Reserve. Shares in Asia Pacific were mostly higher in Thursday's trade as investors in Asia Pacific continue monitoring the situation surrounding China Evergrande Group. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index rose 1.96%. Mainland Chinese stocks closed higher, with the Shanghai Composite climbing 0.42% to 3,643.58, while Nikkei shed 0.67%. In Africa, South Africa's JSE Africa Top 40 trade on positive note. Namibia's overall index negative, while others are still maintaining previous figures. Boss Able, Business Express.
Thank you, Boss, and this is where we end this edition of Business Express. We value your feedback, so keep the comments, observations, and suggestions coming, and be informed that all previous episodes are available on YouTube on the NTA's channel. Business Express returns Friday at 3 p.m. I'm Leah Kating Baba. Keep thinking and doing business.